Well, now I feel like a terrible human being because I made an assumption based off of the title of the episode. So my thoughts on episode 6 of World's Finest Assassin gets reincarnated into another world. So let's get into it. So yeah, extremely depressing and dark episode that I guess, I don't know, I kind of feel as if this episode was just really kind of centered around this is terrible world, here's Prince to save it. Because it's pretty much everything that happened. But yeah, this all kind of centers around harem member number 3, which is Maha. And Maha, of course, is working with a bunch of orphan children to make sure they're fed by doing tours in the city. So every time somebody comes into the city, they'll rush out there and say, hey, are you looking for this? We know where the finest places are, and they'll actually take them there and get paid for it so they can actually eat for the day. And unfortunately, at some point, some random guys show up and kidnap them and take them off to an orphanage. And this orphanage is really, its whole purpose is to, I guess, take advantage of some decree that the Lord's wife has made, which is if somebody takes in homeless children, they encourage this by giving them money. So if you say, hey, I have 15 orphanages, they'll go, well, thank you. Here's this much money for those children. Thank you for taking care of the homeless of this area. So it obviously seems very quickly that they're doing this just for the money and not really to take care of the children. And this gets even worse when we kind of assume, basically get into human trafficking and even worse, selling the children's bodies. But mainly starting out, it really focuses on Aoife, who seems to be the most mature and the most, I guess, attractive looking. So all these lords they're working for all pay for this one girl to the point where she's just basically losing all hope. And even to the point where some of the other ones being dragged into it decide to actually scar their own faces. This annoying girl decides to scar herself in order to prevent them from winning her. Like I said, none of this is enjoyable to watch. It does bring up the debate, because I honestly think that my brother Chris is going to have a huge problem watching this episode. It does beg the question of what exactly in here was purposeful. It was interesting because early on when we first started this series, one of the concerns that my brother had was that Rui Tsukiyo is obviously the one writing this series. And this is a person that is more well known, at least in the West, for their work with Redo of Healer. So it does really seem like this episode of Any really does feel like that type of writing. I think it is me probably looking too much into it. And don't get me that I'm being negative on the show or anything like that. It's just it brings up the question of what purpose does this episode show? Yes, it obviously shows that Maha goes through some really terrible stuff. She witnesses these children around her that she's pretty much devoted her life to taking care of in order to, obviously, like I said, figure out this whole system of doing tours for people just so they can get fed, because obviously, even in this home, they're getting fed less than what they were able to scrounge together on their own. So obviously they were better off before they came to this place that had a really nice roof, had food given to them, and on top of that, their bodies are being given off to different lords to make this guy a bunch of money. So there's nothing here that's better off for them. It's a terrible place for them to be. But I guess my question comes, why did it need an entire episode devoted to this? I mean, granted, and technically the whole segment with Lo showing up is the very end of it. He shows up and says, I'm the prince, I'm taking you away, which was a cool thing, because despite, obviously him saying, we need 3 days to prepare her for you. Yeah, I if Lu didn't see that coming from a mile away, I would really question him as a main character, because, again, he's very smart. He knows people's body language. He knows the fact that he's seen Maha was basically her eyes asking for help. I would argue that even the body language of the torn orphanage guys looking at her, he probably caught that. So yes, the rescue's cool. I even like the fact that Tart gets involved by basically disguising herself as one of the girls to get this guy caught for human trafficking. It's cool they got Tart involved for once. I mean, this is technically the first case where we see Tart has a mission to do something. And I love how they ended. Pretty much the entire ending was great, because it's obviously the payoff of an entire episode of doom and gloom to have Lu show up, be the prince in shining armor that shows up and saves everybody. Tart showing up and doing something as well. But again, I question, did this need an entire episode devoted to this is a terrible place that Maha's in, and look at all these girls pretty much having to mutilate themselves to avoid things. I don't know. I feel like I'm being very negative, but at the same time, I feel like this episode was kind of a waste because I don't think it needed an entire episode to get across to us that these girls were in a bad situation. And obviously, yes, I kind of feel bad by the fact that I was making fun of this idea of Lou going to this Lord's place that is just full of harem members because of the title, and it ends up just being human trafficking. There was nothing harem fun about it. Unless you're into those kind of hentai, I'm not going to question anything. I will say, despite me questioning the need to have an entire episode devoted to this, it did build Maha's character and her compassion and her willingness to help those in need around her. She's obviously has a very compassionate heart. She's taken care of these kids for a long time. She's very crafty in how she's devised something to keep them safe and keep them fed. And it shows her nurturing nature when she tries to reach out to those that are in pain. Even though technically it does play into the idea that she's willing to leave these girls to seek out her prince. I don't know this is a bad thought process, but typically when you're trying to show characters as being compassionate, the idea of this prince showing up to rescue you from this bad place looks kind of bad when you're not doing the whole process of, wait, we can't leave the others, but I can't leave my sisters here. I can't leave the others here and just run off on my own. But yeah, she does. Anyways, it was a good ending. It was a happy ending. I'm happy that it's a happy ending. Unfortunately, I think the effects, especially for characters like Aoife, is there's no healing those wounds. Despite the girl getting her face healed, that's great. These kids are probably going to be messed up for a long time, and it's very unfortunate. But I'm not against this kind of storytelling being told. I'm fine with this concept of, yes, there is human trafficking. This is a thing. This is a reality. I'm not against pointing out a reality of a world. I mean, that's just like the first episode opens up with them selling women. This is a reality of this world. It is not a happy-go-lucky world. And there's going to be people that need to be assassinated. And that's what's great, because Lou is the one that's going to be taking them out for doing said terrible things. Like I said, my question really is, did we need an entire episode devoted to this, despite there only being a few parts where it technically develops Maha? But that's my thoughts on the episode. Again, I'm not saying this is a terrible story. I'm just questioning, did it need an entire episode devoted to it? But let me know in the comments down below what you think. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a like down below. Again, comment, subscribe if you haven't already. Share this video if you can. Support us on Patreon or in the tips link in the description below. We definitely appreciate everybody that does. And y'all take care.